This is the AMD Radeon R7 350, a budget-oriented GPU made for Asian countries that you might want to consider. I have been fascinated by our journey to explore the limits of what we can do with some of the budget-oriented GPU options out there. But I have not been very good at including AMD, and it is time to change. Chinese website Banggood, you might remember from some other devices they have provided for the channel, suggested I try to see what I could do with one of these. The R7 350 was introduced in 2015 exclusively for the Asia-Pacific markets to capitalize on a lot of MOBA titles that were being explosively successful in China, which is why they are not particularly frequent on my side of the world. Interestingly enough, you can import one from China using sites like Banggood, link in the description, for about the price that I paid for my GT 1030. But should you? What do you actually get for that? While it is really hard to get a good idea of the level of performance of a device just based on a spec sheet, one thing really jumps out. Newer models of this card come with 4 GB of VRAM, making it double the capacity of other GPUs I could buy for the same price in my region, and probably the most VRAM of any GPU I own. Superficially, at least, it does seem to have a lower core clock to other comparable GPUs. So if you're considering importing one of these devices, when exactly does the extra VRAM come in handy? Let's start with the best example, Grand Theft Auto V, the extraordinarily popular open world game. If you have run this game's benchmark as many bloody times as I have, or if you have been following the channel for some time, you might know that it usually starts pretty okay, but performance always drops a fair bit on the chase scene at the end of the benchmark, no matter how much you drop the settings. Turns out the reason for this is that towards the end of the benchmark, GTA 5 uses a large amount of video memory, and this has some interesting effects. On integrated GPUs, like in the case of this laptop, the GPU has no dedicated video memory and so simply utilizes the RAM, which is why the benchmark utilizes all 8 gigs of available RAM. In the case of my first trashed computer, I was using a GPU with only 1 GB, so it will quickly fill up and start using regular RAM, which will also fill completely, which in turn will lead to terrible stuttering. So back to the matter at hand, the marvelous 4 GB of VRAM in the R7 350 are more than sufficient, so the GTA 5 benchmark not only has perfect performance on the lowest settings in the initial sections, but also maintains near 60 FPS at the end of the benchmark while using over half of the available VRAM. Since I was curious, I decided to do something insane that I rarely consider. Raising some of the settings. I raised texture quality to medium and the population density to its default level, and the game used more than 2.3 gigs, but performance remains very high all around. The R7 350 supports Vulkan, the newest API that succeeds OpenGL. Vulkan support is obligatory to play Wolfenstein II: The New Colossus, which probably is the most GPU-heavy game I have tried so far on this channel, barely managing to get 30 FPS after disabling shadows on the GT 1030, Nvidia's most modern low-end GPU. Interestingly enough, part of this game's issue seems to have to do with high VRAM usage. Uploading the game on the R7 350 on the lowest settings, 720p, and with shadows disabled, the game immediately takes over almost 2.5 gigs of VRAM. The advantage of having enough for that is that the game runs fantastically well, even on some of the most intense shooting scenes. Hold on a second, did that guy just went out flying? I believe I can fly. Huh. One final example of benefiting from the large VRAM is PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, China's current obsession. This game really likes its memory, as just running the game on 1080 on lowest settings uses more than 6 gigs of RAM and almost 2 gigs of video memory. However, it can easily go over that at moments or when you open your menu, so the extra VRAM will certainly help. And the R7 350 is able to manage between 30 and 40 FPS on the old map with plenty of VRAM to spare. But VRAM is not a silver bullet that will make every game better. Some games have optimization issues that are not strictly related to VRAM, like my old friend Nier Automata, the game that I used to test raw GPU power. If you use the far mode from the video in the corner, you can disable the very intense global illumination of the game, and with that, the GPU does pretty well on 720 in a short test, but keep in mind the extra VRAM will not be of particular help. Another good example is Assassin's Creed Origins. In full 1080, the game could not reach playable performance. I had to drop to 720 to reach anything acceptable on my test setup. By comparison, the GT 1030 was able to reach playable levels, but on full 1080. Extra VRAM is also really not going to help here. Finally, I wanted to add a game that I'm slowly getting into, Quantum Break from 2016. This game released with a lot of weird performance issues, and I have been unable to dedicate a video to it simply because I can't find any extra tricks apart from forcing lower resolutions. In any case, this game on the lowest settings, 720p, and using the automatic super sample that runs the game on the lower internal resolution, had acceptable performance, which drops when using any power but manages to stay over 30 FPS in most instances. But VRAM is underutilized, not exactly the best GPU for this kind of job since the performance bottleneck is somewhere else down the line. So if you're hunting for a new budget GPU, should you consider the R7 350? That will depend on your options and the games you want to play. Once again, this R7 350 was made specifically for parts of the Asian market, so if you can find it or import it for a price similar to the GT 1030, it might be a really good option for open world games or some very modern engines that require a ton of VRAM to run properly. If you want to play some of the most problematic action titles, you might do better with a quicker GPU of the same price range. Although, if you're willing to sacrifice enough, this GPU can provide some amazing performance. Also, while it is not as small as something comparable like the GT 1030, it does not need any extra power to function, so that's nice. There you have it. There is still more to get out of this guy in some more extreme conditions. There is a more detailed comparison that I want to do in some very specific circumstances, but that will have to wait for its own video. Thank you for watching my video, which you can also enjoy as a written article over at ModMy. And thank you donated to support the channel over Patreon, as always.